slides for our friends here.
English is okay with you guys?
Yeah, English please. Yeah.
I admit that I was of two minds about coming to see the ROM's new exhibit, Auschwitz, Not So Long Ago and Not So Far Away, that opened on the weekend and will run until at least September. On the one hand, I needed to see it because I felt it's my duty to see it, as a Jew and also as a Jewish journalist. But I also went with some dread. I'd been to the real Auschwitz site back in the 1990s with the March of the Living, and I visited lots of other death camps from the Nazis, in Germany and in Poland and even in the Netherlands, and I've been to lots of Holocaust museums. So how would this visit compare with the overpowering grief and horror of visiting the real thing? Would it work to walk through one floor of 500 artifacts and photos from the actual Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum, and see items also lent from survivors in Canada and other museums around the world? And I wanted to know why Canada needed another Auschwitz exhibit. The ROM hosted one 8 years ago about the architecture of the gas chambers. It was called the Evidence Room. It opened in 2017, the same year that this traveling exhibit launched in Spain. It was developed by the same Canadian Holocaust expert, Professor Robert Jan van Pelt. And I wondered, would it be weird to see Auschwitz at the Royal Ontario Museum, a museum and space where school groups and families have come for generations to look at the totem poles and see the giant dinosaur skeletons? And the exhibit lands as we're in a very different world now after October 7th, which has been described as the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. So I wondered, would they change their exhibit or would they tweak it a bit to address the spike in antisemitism and hate that Jews here in Canada are now experiencing? And the fact that many people, especially online, promote Holocaust denial and distortion and call Israel the new Nazis because of Gaza.
This is why Auschwitz, in my opinion, still matters today. If we can't begin to come to some kind of better understanding of our species' capacity for self-annihilation and for such mass violence, how are we going to try to see these warning signs in the present day, and how are we going to strengthen our efforts to prevent them further?
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, January 13th, 2025. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, and made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Check 1, 2. My colleague and I from the CJN were expected for our private media tour of the exhibit at the ROM on Thursday afternoon. So as we hurried towards the entrance, we came upon a lone man, a senior citizen. He was holding up a handmade sign that read, "Gaza, not long ago, not far away, 16,000 children massacred so far. Have we learned nothing?" He wouldn't give us his name or his profession because he's afraid of being doxxed.
And it is terrible. I'm not saying anything that I'm sure it's horrible inside, and I can imagine. But so is the Holocaust that Israel is raining down upon Gaza at the moment. Every day.
At the main entrance to the building, you immediately notice the ROM has prepared for security issues and maybe even sit-ins by anti-Israel protesters, X-ray scanners for baggage and everyone who enters. The exhibit is recommended for kids only over the age of 12, with a heavy emphasis on the grade 10 high schoolers who are taking mandatory Holocaust education now in Ontario. Although on this day, these kids were lining up to see something else at the ROM, a natural history exhibit about wildlife and plants in color. Before touring the actual exhibit myself, I sat down with three organizers. Curator Paul Salmons from the UK, who isn't Jewish. He helped found IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Director Luis Ferrero from the Musealia Company in Spain, whose idea it originally was, back in 2014, and Toronto-based Auschwitz historian Robert Jan van Pelt. He's the son of a Dutch Jewish Holocaust survivor who lost family during the war, and he's one of the world's foremost experts on the architecture of Auschwitz. He teaches at the University of Waterloo. His lifelong research received the Hollywood treatment in a motion picture called Denial, which was the story of the British trial of a notorious Holocaust denier, David Irving, who sued American Special Envoy Deborah Lipstadt for libel. Von Pelt's 750-page brief helped prove that Auschwitz was built for mass murder of people. Irving lost his trial. The judge called him a racist anti-Semite. I told Van Pelt and the others about our encounter with the protester outside.
Let me start. I'm a historian. And, as a historian, I'm basically trying to get, first of all, my facts right. In this case, the facts about Auschwitz, this particular instance, on the basis of evidence, of solid evidence, forensic study of evidence. And then I can attach an interpretation to it. But in some way, when visitors come through this exhibition and they ask me, what am I supposed to get out of it? I said, you can get out of it whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you how to interpret this. We are not forcing an interpretation of these facts based on that evidence on you. So there are people who will, in their interpretation of this exhibition, will think about the human condition in general, of man's inhumanity to man, or whatever we call it, and there will be undoubtedly people who will want to make a parallel to a contemporary situation, like, for example, what's happening in Gaza. I think that's their good right. They're thinking, we are all thinking human beings. Would I agree with that interpretation? I mean, this is where we then can have a debate if this is a right parallel to make or not. And I would say, not really as a historian, but this case as a thinking, responsible adult who is part of the civil society, I would say I would like to debate it, man. I wouldn't agree with it. I think what's happening in Gaza is different. I've argued with friends about it. I've talked to my students about it. There are some parallels, but there are, of course, other dimensions that are radically different.
The exhibit lands after 15 months of non-stop protests up the street from the University of Toronto, online, at hospitals, down the road. And I'm wondering, how were you prepared, or how did the exhibit change, if anything? Because when it started in 2017, it was a different world.
Well, the exhibition hasn't been changed in terms of the present-day situation, but both Auschwitz and the Holocaust are very present in our popular discourse across many different social, political, humanitarian agendas. I think that's actually one of the reasons why it's important to continue to study this history, to try to understand it better. I'm thinking for young people, for students, as well as for adults, that when various claims about the past are made in the present, we have to try to navigate those claims, and we're better equipped the more we understand the complexity of the past, and the more hopefully we can develop our critical thinking faculties as well. So these sorts of claims need to be taken seriously. They matter to people. People who are protesting obviously care deeply about the suffering that they're seeing, and I think we can agree on the need to end human suffering, wherever we see it. We can be outraged by what we see, but whether it's helpful to invoke this particular past in this situation, which can perhaps be seen as another attack, another wound in this ongoing conflict. Is that the best way to try to bring conflict to an end? Is it the best way to try and understand the other, to try and understand each side that is involved in this? I'm not convinced that it is. It's something which is an expression clearly of great anger and pain and outrage, as I say, but how positive it is in terms of invoking that comparison, I'm not sure.
The only thing I will say is that one of the things I really appreciate, and I think is shared with all of the team, is that when we go into the exhibition, there is, because of the auditor partly, but I think it's because there's a very impressive silence. And we live now in a world with a lot of noise. And one of the other things I really have learned so much from actually Robert and Paul is the complexity of, in general, story, and particularly in this story. So sometimes when we try, or some people try to simplify issues with a logo or with a motto, I think they're missing a lot of reflection and of the complexity, that you need this silence like we have in the exhibition for people to really understand a little bit more the complexity of of just of life of human beings. So I would just hope that this person, whatever he thinks, and he's entitled to that, and as has been said, it is a human tragedy what we see. I hope he or she has also the chance to come to the exhibition and actually spend a couple of hours in silence and understand the complexity. If we all are open to stop shouting and making noise and go into reflection mode, I think it will be probably for the best of all of us.
Just because we're talking a lot about the crystal as a display
The exhibit
place
is mounted inside the crystal at the ROM in a gallery on the fourth floor, complete with stark angles and oddly placed corners. And it proved challenging to mount the exhibit because it wouldn't all fit, which means part of the original show isn't in Toronto for space, but also security reasons. The ROM is under renovations to redo its controversial and somewhat hated crystal entrance feature designed by Daniel Libeskind, the Polish Jewish-born architect who also designed Canada's Holocaust Memorial in Ottawa and the Wheel of Conscience at Halifax's Pier 21 Museum.
Well, meet us just shortly.
Is there a place I can put my coat?
Oh, of course. No, I can
Our
take
interview
those.
finished, the PR team brings us up to the exhibit space itself. It is a bit disconcerting because before you enter, you don't really have a hint of what awaits you, except for the bold black Auschwitz title. And when you see the pop-up stand where you borrow the audio guide and the headset from a young attendant wearing a blue coat.
And do you folks know how the audio guide works? There's gonna be numbers on the wall, so let's say number 1, you click 1, and then just hit the green button, okay? And then if you want to click 2, you head over.
Hello, and welcome to our exhibition. If you haven't already done so, please start to make your way into the first of our galleries. You will go through several doors and bear left down a short hall. As you do so, think about why Auschwitz matters today. It is one of the darkest chapters in human history, a constant reminder of the worst human civilization is capable of. During World War II, it was the largest of 6 Nazi death camps specifically designed to murder vast numbers of Jewish people immediately upon arrival. However, unlike other death camps, Auschwitz had additional roles, including being a slave labor camp. This means that although over 1 million people were killed at Auschwitz, there were survivors. In this exhibition, you'll hear their testimony and see a large number of artifacts, many of which are on display for the first time. Together, the words of the survivors and the objects on display help us answer a question. How did a society very similar to our own and made up of people just like you and me create such a place?
And here we come face to face with a life-size photo of a pile of brown faded shoes belonging to the victims. And one shoe stands out. It's red, like the girl in the red dress from Schindler's List. That shoe is in a case right before us. It's very quiet when you come in, and there's a red, high-heeled leather shoe. First thing you see when you come in, a woman's dress shoe belonging to an unknown deportee to Auschwitz, 1940s. Collection of the Auschwitz Museum. And then you read a poem that's on the black wall, and it's by Moshe Scholstein, and it's an excerpt from I Saw a Mountain from 1947. We are the shoes. We are the last witnesses. We are shoes from grandchildren and grandfathers, from Prague, Paris, and Amsterdam, because we are only made of fabric and leather, and not of blood and flesh. Each one of us avoided the hellfire. There's also a concrete fence post taken from Auschwitz with the barbed wire attached. The first part, of course, is about how we started. The first gallery was a bit of a blur, to be honest. As somebody who's studied the Holocaust and written about it for over 50 years, since I did my first book report on Night by Elie Wiesel when I was a teenager, I thought I didn't need to closely examine each and every framed map or sketch. Maybe I was also trying to protect myself. At any rate, I skimmed, and I only stopped when something grabbed my attention. I was surprised. The first thing that I saw that stopped me was a sketch of 2 naked men in an embrace. The exhibit broadens the story at first to the many Nazi victims, not only about the Jews, gay love, Romas, political prisoners. This is a white coat and thermometer of Dr. George Renault, who was the first senior physician and director of the Hartheim Institute Asylum, where 28,000 people were murdered, which was part of the program to kill people with disabilities. And they have victims' glasses and necklaces and even a compact for makeup. We have a prisoner uniform from the Sachsenhausen camp of 1941. A red triangle identified a prisoner for political offenses. It's an upside-down red triangle. Today, that has a different meaning. I immediately thought about how since October 7th, those upside-down triangles means you're being targeted for murder by Hamas. Well, I thought I was going to be able to get through this and not feel much, because I've been to Auschwitz, as I told you. I've been to Majdanek, I've been to Dachau, I've been to Treblinka, been to Camp Vught in the Netherlands, Toronto's Holocaust Museum, Berlin's. Maybe I was desensitized, but I would be wrong. It was the small things, the everyday things, that got me and surprised me. It's hard to look at this. This is a onesie and a little dress for babies, and broken pottery of children's dishes, and a little ceramic bunny, and some buttons, red, blue, purple buttons, or marbles. I don't know what they are. Children's clothing and objects carried into Auschwitz by deportees. Collection of the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. And behind it is a stroller frame, a basket. Could be a baby bag that we all had when we had kids. We keep the diapers in, and extra bottles, change of clothes. Behind it is a big mural of the trains stopped on the side tracks in Auschwitz, and all the luggage is spilled out from the train cars. There's no people left. And the inmates are processing the possessions of the people. It's from 1944, this picture. It's hard to look at this. Ria. And a lot of this next stuff in the section here is about the gas chambers, the door, the Zyklon B gas. These were here in 2017 at the exhibit that the ROM put on the architecture of killing. And they've kept them. These are not the original, of course. These are reproductions that Van Pelt had a lot to do with. But right before you get to the door of the gas chamber reproduction is a little baby shoe with a sock inside. And it's like, you think you're going to wear those socks again. You take the shoes off, put the socks inside. That is. But of course, the child never did. And they have gas masks in the Zyklon B and artists' renditions of the Sonderkommandos. This is a very hard thing to watch for people who have never seen the gas chambers before. It's very quiet in here. I'm the only one talking. Then you come to a section called Canada. When deportees arrived here, they had brought all their pots and pans and clothing and shoes, foreign currency, and they were stripped of all these when they arrived, and all the sorting sheds were known as Canada. The inmates named it that way because Canada represented unlimited resources that were out of reach. That's what the sign says here at number 22. And after they were sorted, it says 5 freight cars filled with goods that left Auschwitz daily. And in the middle are the possessions. There's a strainer. There's a cup with a clown on it and a dancing dog. Beautiful cranberry glass ashtrays, giant safety pins, spectacles, buttons, wine bottle stoppers, a grater, grate cheese, beautiful bowls, a hairbrush, can opener, flasks, shaving brushes, and razors, as if they were going to a hotel. The SS, it reads here, torched these barns in January 1945, before they abandoned Auschwitz when the Soviets were closing in, but 2 sheds full of this stuff remained. Reminds me so much of the movie The Tattooist of Auschwitz, where one of the stars worked.
When you are in Auschwitz, you are in the original barracks. You're in an original crematorium. You are surrounded by a space that's all original, and that's fantastic. But in general, what you do not have is that you are in some way confronted with almost always a tiny artifact, yeah, that forces you, in the words of Nabokov, the Russian novelist, American Russian novelist, that forces you, or that allows you to sink into the artifact itself. So there is a kind of paradox at work. That we think that when you are in a historical environment, the big thing that envelops you, let's call Notre Dame Cathedral right now. You're now back into that space since the restoration. And that's a fantastic experience. But I think at the emotional level, at the existential level, in some way, for you to be the big reality in relationship to a tiny reality that's in front of you, it's not anymore that you can just now drift around and be kind of filled with the experience, but you have to work very hard in some way to enter into that artifact, into that fragment, and then that in some way explodes. Then it becomes a world.
Throughout its 5-year history, the prisoners of Auschwitz and its almost 50 subcamps were used as slave labor. Whatever the weather conditions, they wore nothing more than the uniform you can see here. They farmed the land, dug drainage ditches, constructed factories, mined coal, produced munitions for the German war effort, or worked in the large nearby chemical plant owned by IG Farben, at the time the world's second largest corporation.
So this is one of the main highlights of this museum exhibit. It's a barrack from Auschwitz's satellite camp Monowitz. Seeing this is unbelievable. Just the outside. You don't have the barracks inside. It's just the shell. And here's a stretcher. Metal, wood, and canvas that would take people who were already starved and beaten and suffering to medical care, but a lot of prisoners, it says, quickly declined. And then, oh my God, here's an operation table, test tubes, medical instruments. I feel sick seeing this up close. More pictures of the people in the camps who did medical experiments. There's Mengele. And here's the rings of Leib Kreutzberg and Miriam Littman. Jewelry made out of a spoon by a Jewish prisoner at Auschwitz who eventually came to Canada after the war. He made them for a woman he'd fallen in love with in Auschwitz. Both survived, but after liberation, the pair didn't ultimately marry and went their separate ways and never saw each other again. He gave the ring to a friend who'd also survived Auschwitz, who donated it to the U.S. Holocaust Museum. She kept it for the rest of her life, even after she'd moved to Israel and married. Here's curator Paul Salmons picking up the story.
Two of the most powerful artifacts that perhaps we've actually exhibited anywhere are on display for the first time here at the ROM. These are the stories of Leib Kreutzberg and Miriam Littman, two prisoners in Auschwitz who'd known each other a little bit before the deportations, but met again on either side of the wire in Auschwitz. Leib Kreutzberg was actually a member of the Sonderkommando, the Jewish prisoners that were forced to work inside the gas chambers and the crematoria. Miriam is someone he'd fallen in love with, and he managed to fashion 2 rings from a silver spoon, one of which he gave to her, has a kind of plastic implant in it as well, but the engraved numbers, their prisoner numbers, their names and their initials and their prisoner numbers engraved on each of these rings. But more than this, he also helped to keep her alive with other things he was able to pass to her during and saved her aunt at one point also. Those rings separated after the death marches. They both survived Auschwitz. They both survived the death march in another camp, but when they parted, they didn't marry as he had hoped. They parted their ways. Those rings have never been together before, but we reunite them here for the first time in this exhibition. And this is, I think, symbolic as well, emblematic of the entire approach of the exhibition, which is telling a story of mass inhumanity and destruction and dehumanization. But throughout the exhibition, we struggle also to rehumanize those people that were dehumanized, to show them as real living people, as people who had loves and hopes and dreams. And this is a form of resistance and resilience in Auschwitz that we're able to tell here for the first time.
It was 5:20 when the ROM announces it will soon be closing for the night. So we had to leave, return our audio guides, and go downstairs. You get a sense of what the survivors' lives were like as you exit.
Everybody can choose what they want to do in life with themselves, go right or go left. And the Torah says, choose life. But the important thing is what life.
Stay away from hate. It's not necessary. Whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're yellow, you are a human being. You haven't asked to come into this world. You were made. And while you're here, do the right thing. Create love.
When you see the long list of donors who helped build Canada after the war, corporations, philanthropists like the Azrieli Foundation, and seeing familiar names of local Holocaust survivors on the wall, including Ellie Gotts and Judy Cohn, who've spent decades educating students and the public about hate, one classroom visit at a time. This exhibit, though, focuses not so much on the survivors, but about the place and the camp and the society which allowed such a camp to happen. And visitors are encouraged to dance again, reminiscent of the Nova Festival on October 7th. But what you're supposed to be left with, curators say, is a sense of loss, from the well-preserved prayer shawl or talit belonging to a man who was from Auschwitz before it became home to the death camp, to the home movies showing different Jewish families posing for the cameras during happier times, in the summer playing ball or at a meal.
We don't feel that we should try and make this right. We leave them with loss. We leave them with pain. We leave them actually alongside these artifacts also with beautiful film of pre-war life to show the people not as they were in the camp, not as they were reduced to, not as skin and bone or concentration camp uniforms or ashes even, but how they lived and what was lost and that void that exists across Europe. And that's what we want people to go away with.
There was one final stop. As at most museums, you have to exit through the gift shop. I was actually dreading going through there because I didn't want them to be actually selling anything from the exhibit. I prayed they wouldn't have anything, but they did. A lady singing, which is kind of jarring. They're selling books of a catalog of the exhibit for $65 and some actual scholarly books. Nate Leipziger's book, Anna Molnar, John Freund, so Judith Rubinstein, those are local Holocaust survivors who wrote their biographies. And then they have mugs, black mugs with the slogan, "Not long ago, not far away," pens, notebooks, tote bags, and a blue one that said, "It happened, therefore it can happen again, Primo Levi. Not long ago, hashtag not far away." Pencils $2.50, the journal is $14, the mug is $22. Right beside an exhibit about the Arctic fox and the sperm whale. I feel icky about that. To be fair, having the books was okay because people want to learn more. And there is an entire world of special extra programs and lectures on tap, a big educational component for teachers that's going on to accompany the event where these important Holocaust education conversations will take place. School groups get in free, and we're told interest is very high. Plus, there is an anti-racism component that's been developed by the ROM, and they'll place them in and around the gallery beginning next month, according to the ROM's director and CEO, Josh Bassages.
I feel that ROM, as an institution that has broad areas of exhibitions and installations, I think is a trusted institution, an institution that people have faith will present information effectively, accurately, in a meaningful way, is the ideal kind of institution to present a show like this.
Like you mean instead of Toronto Holocaust Museum?
As an institution that is not seen as a distinctly Jewish institution or a distinctly this or a distinctly that, but an institution that represents and is for all Ontarians and Canadians, and I think is in a position to underscore the importance of recognizing the history of the Holocaust and of Auschwitz in a way that I think people of all backgrounds, we're an institution that we will have people of many different backgrounds coming into the museum, and I believe they will come here and see this exhibition. Some will come specifically because they care about the show and they want to see it. Others will come because they have no idea. They come here to see dinosaurs or ancient Egypt, but then they see the exhibition, understand its importance, and take meaning in it. And that's the kind of thing that we as a comprehensive museum can provide to the public that is a little bit different from an institution that has a particular focus.
There's other timing, though. It lands in a post-October 7th world. Again, how do you navigate? People are different now that it landed. World is different. Jewish people are different. Palestinian people, allies, everyone's different seeing it. So I'm wondering how you approach it. Has anything changed? Have you taken different steps in how it's presented?
The exhibition is substantially the exhibition as it has been traveling the world. So as you know, this is not a ROM-developed project. Right now, we feel like issues of fighting bias and working toward tolerance and understanding are as important as they've ever been. We lived in a very polarized society. And so as we were looking to undertake this show, perhaps the most significant addition that we developed ourselves, which is not actually in the footprint of the exhibition, but here in the museum, is we are an iconic Canadian institution. We are the premier museum in the country, and so being able to present both the Auschwitz exhibition along with another project, which I'm not sure you've heard about yet, which we are calling internally activation stations, is a piece that I think is very important. We decided that what we could do, museums have certain areas that they excel in. And we believe helping people understand and empathize with other points of view is a very important one for that. So we have created what we're calling activation stations that will be presented in 5 places in our galleries outside of the Auschwitz exhibition. And these will be drawing on objects in our galleries, artworks and objects, and helping people look at them from different points of view. So if you think about the ADL pyramid of hate, that the foundational ones have to do with bias as sort of the foundation, leading to hatred, which then leads, according to this sort of theory, to violence and then to genocide. Where we have a part to play is at that base level about helping people empathize with others, reduce their bias, be conscious of their bias. So these activation stations will be up for the entire run of the exhibition and probably later, and they will probably be seen, we expect somewhere about 325, 350,000 people to make their way through the exhibition. We anticipate that about 1 million people will see these activation stations, which will be coming in February, and then they will have a life of their own after the project, and we anticipate being able to share them with other cultural institutions and museums across Ontario that are concerned about building tolerance and understanding of people of different backgrounds.
So are these Holocaust related, Jewish related?
They are not Holocaust related, they are not Jewish related, they're more generally looking at issues of empathy and fighting bias.
Surprisingly, after I got home that night, I found myself very emotional. All I could do was sit on my couch, wrapped in a blanket. I couldn't even do much except watch the Leafs play hockey on TV. Do I think everyone should see this exhibit? Yes. For me, it was kind of a pilgrimage, much different than when I visited the real Auschwitz on a bus with high school students and survivors.
What I believe that an exhibition like this can do is expand human imagination and compassion. I think really that is possible in a way that because you are alone with the artifact, you're alone with the story. And just Paul talked about the story of the rings. And I think that right now we really need that. So I don't want, at no point in the exhibition, at no point do we moralize. Not a single point, not even at the end, where there's no point that we said, bad Germans, or never again, or fight antisemitism, or any kind of direction. We do not give any direction for people of how to interpret the material beyond the fact that we want them to pay attention and learn to pay attention. I do think that one of the real big problems is that we do not pay attention. We are unable to do it because we have an overflow of information. We are slaves to our feeds, our cell phones, and whatever like that. And the one thing that this exhibition, I think, achieves is that it creates this hour and a half or 2 hours where people are disconnected from their cell phones, where they're not checking their messages, and where they're paying attention to this. And I think that October 7th, so to speak, and the aftermath of it, is again a situation that forces us to pay attention. So, you can say this is a kind of cop-out, because I do not want to, I do in this case do not want to say one way or the other. But I'm tired of a world in which we only talk in slogans about complex realities. And that's the reason that I think that if I, as an educator, can create an environment in which people are disconnected from all the noise around us, and Louise also remarked on that already, and where people learn again, the old art of paying attention. Orthodox Jews know how to pay attention. They do it every day in their morning prayers. Monks pay attention to the world through the rituals that they're doing. We have lost that ability. I'm seeing my students. I love them, but they don't know how to pay attention. And this is one thing that this exhibition can do. And once we pay attention, I think we can start to learn to people we disagree with. And that truly talk, not shouting slogans at each other, and enter into a different world. Because what we ask people to do in this exhibition is to enter in a world that is frightening, that is apparently alien, apparently only, and what we also show, I think, is that when people talk about, they really don't want to see the exhibition.
That's how I felt.
So one of the things that we are doing is basically help you to get over that threshold, I think, at the beginning of the exhibition. And that means also that same fear for us to enter into what seems to be a frightening world, and in this case I would say that would be for Jews to talk to Palestinians or to other Canadians about Gaza, but that's frightening. But we cannot simply turn away from all the environments that make us uncomfortable. And certainly this exhibition is an apparently very uncomfortable story. And I've never met a single person who came out of this exhibition and who said that he or she or they had made the mistake of visiting it.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, made possible in part by the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation, who, by the way, are also on that list of sponsors of the exhibit. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Write to me at info@thecjn.ca and let me know your reaction. And thanks for listening to mine.